Sanford, Florida has been in the news a lot lately. City of Sanford, Florida, because that's where the Zimmerman Martin shooting took place. And it happens that my research took me to Sanford, Florida, since last we met. Sanford, Florida was founded by essentially our Sanfords.
Really?
There were two branches of the Sanford family. In the Market Hill story, you see the story about John Sanford, the itinerant tin peddler, who by pluck and luck ends up as a teacher in the greater Amsterdam, New York area when he was 18 years old, because he knew how to read and write, and they needed a teacher, and he happened to be staying overnight in a farm up in the Log City area. And so that's how he became a teacher, and that's how he ended up staying here and founding the carpet industry. His older brother, Nehemiah Sanford, stayed in Connecticut and made a fortune in brass tacks. Okay? And he had a son and heir, Henry Shelton Sanford, who became a diplomat, a big diplomat, and before and during and after the Civil War, he was minister to Belgium until 1869. He'd been appointed by Lincoln to be minister to Belgium, and then U.S. Grant wanted to make him minister to Spain, and I guess his wife didn't want to go to Spain. Anyway, somewhere along the line, Henry marries a well-to-do Philadelphia aristocracy heiress. Okay, and they had a bunch of kids, but Henry was the only heir of the tack fortune, the brass tack fortune. So Henry the diplomat is a first cousin of Stephen Sanford, who was the real genius in the Amsterdam Sanfords, because he's the one who took his father's burned out business and turned it into one of the great industries of the world, and one of the most fabulous. He developed one of the most fabulous personal fortunes in the country. Okay, and all of a sudden Stephen Sanford becomes a ranking social guy. Wow. Stephen's son John, the second John, in the 1890s is looking for a wife. He's 40-something years old, hasn't married yet. And he's something of a playboy, this guy, because he's living off his father's fortune. He goes to Congress and stuff like that, but he's not really involved in the business, and never really is. By this time, the business is running itself. Mm-hmm. And so John Sanford, the 40-something-year-old, is interested in the horses, and he's the guy who is more interested in his father's horse stables than he is in his
carpet
in the carpet industry. So he needs a wife, and by the way, let's go going back to Henry Shelton Sanford and the other branch of the family. After the war, he comes back and forth to the States, but he remains pretty much in Belgium and becomes a confidant of King Leopold, and it becomes his lobbyist to get the United States to recognize Leopold's personal claim to Belgium, with the Congo, and he invests money in the Congo and things like that. But he also invests money in Florida real estate, and lost most of it. Apparently, he was not a very sharp businessman, however good a diplomat he may have been. Mm-hmm. And among other things, he founds what is now the city of Sanford, Florida. It was a completely manufactured community. They figured there was one of those many boom and bust Florida real estate deals. After the war, they figured everybody was going to move to Florida. It was before air conditioning. So Sanford, Florida was founded by them, and they had a big estate down there, among other places around the world. So his daughter Ethel ends up marrying Stephen Sanford's son John. So the two Sanford fortunes plus the incredible Philadelphia fortune all end up in one family. Okay? Stephen Sanford dies 1913. John, his son, inherits the fortune. He has the three spoiled kids, Sarah, Laddie, and Gertrude. Okay? And by the way, that marriage took place in Sanford, Florida. So now they've got the townhouse in New York City on 72nd Street, Upper East Side. They've got the estate in Palm Beach. They've got an estate in South Carolina. They've got God knows what else. And of course, as soon as the old man dies, they rebuild 61 Church Street, which what is now City Hall. And it becomes the fabulous mansion that they spent $2 million refurbishing that building. Essentially, they basically tore down the old building and rebuilt and made this huge brick thing. The whole back half of City Hall was non-existent. Probably from the Common Council chambers, including the Common Council chambers back was all built in 1913-17 era. And they build, among other things, that nursery, right, on the third floor, with the ornamental plaster, with the airplanes and the horses and the different animals built into the ceiling. By the time they get around to doing this, the Sanford kids are grown up. They're born like Laddie was probably 17, 18 years old, even more, 18, 19 years old. He was already away at school. I think he'd already started Yale before they finished the building. The girls were a little bit younger, but not significantly. So that, I think Gertrude was the youngest, born 19, I don't know. She might have been 11 or 12. Okay. So they build this nursery, and it's essentially never used.
Never used.
They all grow up. All this is preliminary to my writing a story about Gertrude, because during World War II, she became a spy, and she was captured by the Nazis and had all these great adventures escaping from the Nazis, and they're shooting at her while she's running across the Swiss border and all this stuff. So that's a great story in and of itself. But they become less and less Amsterdamians, if they ever were, and more just playboys of the Western world. Mm-hmm. Laddie Sanford was like the most eligible bachelor in the country. They were all in the society pay. They're playing golf with the Duke of Windsor. This is they take this estate out on the Hamptons. And it's all wealth beyond our faintest imaginings.
Mm-hmm. And their wealth, as great as it was, compared, just way beyond the pale.
Yeah, you don't think of them as, as being. Even though the mother founded the Century Club down here, you don't think of them as hanging out in Amsterdam. They were New Yorkers, spoiled brats. Along the late 20s, Gertrude is actually the first one to get married, and she's fairly up there. She's late 20s. By the time she gets married in 1929, she has already shot elk in the Grand Tetons. I think been to Alaska on expeditions, and she does this American National History Museum expedition to Africa to come back with the hunting specimens, and it's called the Sanford Legendre expedition, and the other guy in charge of it she ends up marrying. I don't know whether they were having a romance before the trip, but they certainly did afterwards, and he's from this fabulously wealthy New Orleans family. Around the same time, there was a play produced on Broadway called Holiday, which you may have very well have seen because it was made twice into a movie. The second one is the more famous version, starring Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn plays Gertrude Sanford in this movie. And I guess if I recall the plot, Cary Grant is kind of a working guy who worked his way up, kind of modeled after, in fact, I think the author of the play, Philip Barry, who also wrote the Philadelphia Story. And I think he's engaged to the older Sanford girl called Seton in the thing, and and she doesn't understand him as much as the Gertrude character does, and then he ends up with the Gertrude character. There's a scene in the movie where there's a big society ball downstairs, I think in honor of the marrying couple. And the Gertrude character, played by Hepburn, is having her own party upstairs because she can't stand the society fol-de-rol. She's an adventurous. She's not... And so she has her own party upstairs in the nursery. Taking place on East 72nd Street, but it is so much like the City Hall nursery, and it's very poignant looking at this because she mentions that it's the only place she's ever been happy. In that room by herself, playing, right? And I think the nursery at City Hall is probably, I mean, what could it have been like growing up in that kind of, that fabulous wealth where nobody's paying where you can't mix with anybody. Yeah. And that's why she became her own, in her own way, despite her wealth, she did what she wanted to do. And
they were not a part of the community fabric.
Right.
They were just so different.
So I'm up in Fonda the other day, and I'm looking for a copy of this. Among them, doing the newspapers, but I asked them if they had a copy of the Sanfords of Amsterdam because I wanted to see what that book said about Gertrude's adventures in the war, and they did. They also found for me, in a box up in the attic, a scrapbook that somebody had kept and somebody else had donated of the Sanfords. When they were in all the society pages and the rotogravure and stuff like that, Laddie Sanford is the richest and most handsomest bachelor in the whole country and most eligible bachelor, and he ends up marrying the movie star Mary Duncan and all that. Now he wasn't that handsome. He was a good polo player, but he doesn't.
Money makes you look better.
Money definitely makes you look better. And then there's an article about this big party thrown in the East 72nd Street house in honor of the upcoming bride and groom. I think, I got to check the dates, but I think that party took place after the play was written, after Holiday was written. But among the guests, and it lists all the guests, there are a few people from here whose names you would recognize. But it was like they were like an afterthought, we got to invite the people from they were running the factory, and I think Holly Hughes was probably there, Mr. and Mrs. Philip Barry. Barry obviously knew these people well, and apparently they weren't offended by the play, notwithstanding that the Laddie Sanford character comes off as a worthless drunken fop. But isn't that fascinating? But I'm wondering if the play was written afterwards, whether this is the party.
What came first?
Whether this is the party that, only in this case, Gertrude is the Katharine Hepburn character is the bride, not the sister. But
the reporter, the newspaper at the time must have had a full-time reporter just following these folks around, as much as the paper was not devoted to them, but boy, they put
Oh,
tons, and every time
Oh,
you turn
sure.
around, there was stuff
Oh,
there.
yeah, and it was all there was never anything negative.
Oh no.
And here's one of the other sister, Sarah, the older sister, eventually marries, and now she's well along when she gets married. She's like 40 or close to it when she finally marries, and she marries an Italian diplomat in 1937. Panzo, I think his name was. I forget. Well, he's one of Mussolini's boys. Yeah. Mussolini, though, gave him a hard time about marrying the Sanford girl, and held up the permission for like a year or two before he was allowed to go to New York and marry this girl. That's how tight they're. He ends up as Mussolini's ambassador to Belgium, exactly like his wife's maternal grandfather.
Small world.
Yeah, isn't that something? Except he's representing fascist Italy.
Yeah.
Then the story gets really vague, and there's nothing that you will find in the recorder because of what we were just talking about, because the Sanfords were revered, that tells the rest of the story. Because they end up being in Rome, and there is one article from like late 1944 or mid 1944 where the Sanfords finally hear from Sarah for the first time in a year. Now let's see, what's taken place in the last year? Mussolini is overthrown, and the Americans fight their way to Rome. And suddenly, when Rome is liberated, Sarah Sanford reappears. It becomes a very questionable thing. What the heck was happening in between? The story when Panzo, if that's his name, suddenly dies drowning a year or two after the war, is that, well, we don't know if he was a fascist or not to begin with, right? But he changed sides during the war.
Spin City, we can back that up.
Right. He changed sides during the war, and he and his wife lived underground for a year. Well, of course they lived underground. The fascist party had been overthrown, and then the Nazis occupied that part of Italy. The Italy had formally surrendered, but there was no. Mussolini tried to form a government in the north, but basically they were under Nazi occupation. Who the heck knows what they were doing during the war? But it's kind of fascinating that this wealthy American heiress spends the whole war essentially behind enemy lines as the wife of an enemy diplomat.
This is all from Amsterdam.
There's a lot of story there that's untold,
Yeah.
and in the Sanfords of Amsterdam, there is no mention of Sarah during World War II whatsoever. it's like all of a sudden the war's over, her husband's dead.
There you go.
Very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And now the question arises in my mind, how the heck, other than fabulous wealth, does Gertrude get to be a top secret member of the OSS?
Because she's got a connection on the other side of the line, Bob.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Well, you would think if someone were doing a background check today, how could you let this person? And I'm not, and I'm sure she was absolutely 100% pro-American. There seems to be no question about that. But she's got a sister, and not just some second cousin. She's got a sister who is married to one of Mussolini's boys.
Yeah. Well, certainly the thought is, you know what? She has that connection. Maybe there's stuff that she can find out.
Maybe there's stuff she can find out, except they were putting her in charge of what her job was, to go over through all the cables that were coming to the London office. And then they sent it. It's absolutely unclear, unless she wrote it in her 1987 autobiography, which was her second autobiography. I haven't read that. Unless she wrote it in there, it's not at all clear what the heck she was doing in France. But they had her in a WAC uniform as a lieutenant, even though she had never joined the WACs. And she had when she's captured, she's got OSS ID on her, as does the other people with her, and they burned that while they were waiting for the Germans to come down and accept their surrender flag. So what was she doing there? And how the heck did she get out? Because they had, it was a very intricate maneuver to get her out of the country, and she had Nazi help getting out. I mean, there were another guy at the border who was a double agent all through the war, who comes up behind her. She didn't even know who he was, and just whispers to her, "Run." And she ran for the Swiss border and got over, and that was that. But it was it was quite a few months. But she was treated very well while she was there. But I guess she had the money to do that. But it's the untold story is the story I'd like to know.
Yeah, we would like to know the rest of the story.
The rest of the story.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's going to be a whole different book, I think. But anyway, Gertrude's getting a chapter in the book. I don't know if I'm going to mention Sarah's fascist connections or not, because I don't know how relevant that is to my story. But wow. So Sanford, all that springs from Sanford, Florida. Has been in the newspaper lately.
Yeah.
Wow. That's something.
All from Amsterdam.
All from Amsterdam.
No.
Can you?
You can't imagine.
You cannot imagine. When he was the Prince of Wales, the future Edward VIII was hanging out with the Sanfords at the polo grounds and stuff like that. And when Gertrude goes to London, she's throwing parties for the American ambassador to Britain and things like that, who also has a local connection, as you know. As the American ambassador to England, John Wynant, had a son who was in the same plane as Walt Wiedemann from Dutch Hill. And the plane went down, and they were both captured and were prisoners of war together. Yeah.
Interesting.
Little city upon the river.
Not a mean. I come from not a mean city, from no mean city, as St. Paul said, or I'm a citizen of no mean city, meaning Rome. He meant. And that's something. Wow.
You don't have to go far to find interesting history, and people don't recognize how close it all is to home.
In the scrapbook also was John Sanford's funeral in the late 30s. And it was, they had to close Church Street off. They had the funeral at Second Press, and there were pictures. And then there was a whole mob outside the church. I mean, thousands of people, and thousands of people at the cemetery up on Green Hill. And by this time, they'd been out of Amsterdam 10 years, close to it, well, really completely out. Everybody showed up for the end of an era. But it looked like a carnival. In other words, these people weren't standing in a funereal atmosphere. It was a carnival atmosphere. Wow, wow, here comes Laddie. Oh, here comes the Playboy of the Western world. Oh, there's Mary Duncan, the movie star.
Local spectacle.
Yeah, like
it was
the
Oscars. It was a spectacle.
Yeah.
It was a spectacle. But, wow. And apparently the mother who founded the Century Club never much cared for living in Amsterdam. She was a society girl. I mean, she grew up in Brussels under, mixing with royalty.
Yeah,
and she came from Philadelphia royalty.
And we didn't have much royalty. We had a lot of history.
Yeah. And the Sanford, her branch of the Sanfords were always fabulously wealthy, whereas this branch, after all,
With new money, not old
that's
money.
right, they were the nouveau riche.
Yeah.
And the her branch of the Sanfords included descent from Thomas Wells, who had been the early governor of Connecticut, who is the ancestor of more. You got to imagine anybody whose family came over the second or third ship after the Mayflower is going to have a lot of
Relatives.
descendants
Yeah.
anyway. But his descendants include, among the Gertrude Sanford types, also include Gerald Ford, Nancy Davis Reagan, Archibald MacLeish, the poet laureate of the United States at one time, Bruce Dern and Laura Dern, the actors. One of the first founders of the OSS was a distant cousin who probably is the one who hired Gertrude Sanford. A couple of United States senators. One of the original 12 apostles of the Mormon Church, who later became the third mayor of Salt Lake City. One of the founder of Wells Fargo and Company. You just go on and on and on. The list, branching out, is fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Oh.
And I'm sure they're probably related to the three of us somewhere or other. Somewhere or other.
I spent a couple weeks in Sanford back in the middle 50s.
Where exactly is Sanford in the?
It's just north of Orlando.
Isn't there a base
Oh, okay.
there? Isn't there
I don't know. A friend of
military base down there?
mine moved down there to go to work with Martin Marietta, and we went down for a couple weeks.
What's it like?
Back then, it was a lot of orange groves. They were starting to build those block homes along the into the orange groves. They were
So it's like in central
Florida.
Central Florida.
Yeah.
So you can only begin to imagine that in the 1870s it probably didn't amount to a hill of beans.
Yeah, it didn't. It was all orange groves or overgrown
Swampland.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, Sanford Wright Air Base is down there. That's what it is.
I think I've been writing this up, and I think I put a footnote in that despite his bad investments, there's no indication that the party ended up in the poorhouse at any time. Wow. Anyway, what else we got to talk about this? Well, I'm on the County Charter Commission, and we made some moves forward this week. There's a general consensus reached that we want to put the idea of a county legislature up on the ballot. The exact form it's going to take, we're going to work on at the next meeting. In other words, how many members to replace the current Board of Supervisors and the two-hat system that we currently have, and set up legislative districts instead.
Did they draw up the legislative districts?
Well,
somebody said they wanted 3 different.
Well, yeah, we have one proposal that had already been done before we started that called for 8 county legislators. There would be like 3 from the city, and then there would be a legislative district that included the town of Amsterdam, the town of Florida, and town of Glen plus Fonda, I think, and that would have 2 representatives in it. Then there would be a northern district that included the rest of the town of Mohawk, town of Palatine, and Palatine and Nelliston, Palatine Bridge and Nelliston, and that would have 1 representative, and then there'd be a 2-member that picked up St. Johnsville, Charleston. I'm not sure where Root goes. Canajoharie and Root, and Minden. Nah, I'm not sure where Root goes. Root, I think, is in the other district, but I'm not sure. But in any event, it ends up with 8. And it works out. What's nice about it is you keep full town lines, except for moving Fonda across the river. So that you can do that and still fall within the acceptable range of equal districts, or equal number of representatives representing an equal number of citizens, which is what I like about it. So they're going to try to, some people want an odd number, so I said, well, let's try 7 and 11 as well. So they're going to try to draw that up for the next meeting, and we'll look at that. But this would be a major achievement even if it gets on the ballot, because this has to be approved by the Board of Supervisors, which means that some members of the Board of Supervisors would have to vote to essentially abolish their 2 hat positions and make up their minds which one they want to be, the town supervisor or the county representative.
Who are the members on this commission?
Ooh, well, let's see.
How many members?
How many members?
Yeah. All right, we'll name them. We'll count them.
Well, let's name them. There's a woman whose name I forget, a woman who never shows up. Then you got Peter Capabianco, myself, Vinnie Stark. There's a fellow who's an engineer. I forget which town he's from. He's very interesting. There are people with different perspectives, which is nice. You got Jim Post, who I think is the mayor of Palatine Bridge. Dusty, what's his name, is the president of the college.
Schwanger.
Yeah. Bill Wills. Am I missing somebody or not?
Thayer?
Oh, Fred Hitty. Fred Hitty.
And how long a process is this going to?
Oh, very short. We're going to be done in June, and
It'll be on the ballot in the fall?
we're going to be done in June, so they can put it on the ballot. And I guess they have to do it by July something to get it on the ballot, or at least start holding the public hearings or something. And it's going to be relatively simple. Our mandate is to have a charter including a county executive. The legislative district proposal may go on as a separate proposal, so that one doesn't drag the other one down. How we're going to do that technically, I'm not sure. Or that's up to the Board of Supervisors and the county attorney to figure out. I'm just a peon. But anyway, that's moving along. And one of the town supervisors who's in favor of legislative districts says, I asked him, whether you think this has a chance of getting through the board. And he says, yeah. He says, I think this is the current board. This is the only chance. In a generation we're going to have to actually get it to the point where the people can vote on it.
Boy, that'd be great if you guys do that.
That would be.
Need that lever to move heaven and earth on this one.
Well, we'll see what happens. Vinnie Stark abstained on the whole issue of the legislative. He wants to hear from the people first. They might have present us with good reasons why we should keep the present Board of Supervisors. I said, can you think of one? In other words, if you were starting off fresh,
if you up like this,
if you didn't have to deal with the fact that the people who have to vote on it at first are the people who are abolishing their own positions, if you take that political aspect out of it, can you think of a good reason why you would keep the current system? I mean, the current system was put into effect before there was one man, one vote requirement, and it was done. Essentially, the town supervisors get together, and there weren't these huge county issues. There weren't, there'd be a poorhouse. They would meet a couple times a year in those days. You didn't have the road patrols and all these things. Government got very big in between. You didn't have Medicaid.
That takes a big part out of the budget.
Yeah, and actually no brains to manage because they have no say, pretty much.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I've talked enough. Let's see. So Misha did a funeral today. Is that?
Yeah. And next, he's got a big parade Saturday up at Kingsbury. which is
Right.
right next to Queensbury.
Right next to Queensbury.
Yeah, they've got a big anniversary parade up there doing Saturday, and the next Saturday on the 12th, he's got a interment service up at St. Mary's Cemetery to play. So he's being busy and earning some money so we can have better food when we go to Scotland. So
Very good.
He's earned his
Well,
plane
you're
ticket.
going to eat nothing but haggis when you get over there, aren't you?
I hope we can eat more than haggis. I'm going to tell you that. Because I believe, from experience, I think haggis is the reason the Scots left Scotland.
They came here.
And came here. Yeah, I think so. But I don't know. Which is also the same reason that the Irish left Ireland because of the corned beef.
The corned beef was better over here?
They were hoping there wasn't going to be any corned beef over here.
No, that's nonsense. They didn't have corned beef in Ireland. They didn't have beef at all.
That's right. It all belonged to the Brits.
Did you ever read well, you must have read Angela's Ashes by now, haven't you, Frank McCourt?
No.
Huh?
No.
Oh, it's a good read. Fabulous writing
No,
style.
I've never read that.
Anyway, he was talking about, I mean, he's alive, and he's talking about growing up poor in Ireland and how on Easter they would have the only meat they had in the year. And that would be like a calf's head or something like that. I mean, that was it. The meat they got was what nobody else wanted.
Yeah.
And that was a delicacy for them. They would probably love the haggis or however it's pronounced.
Yeah.
Wouldn't even know.
My wife likes it, but
Really?
it's got liver and oats and other organ meat in it. But no.
Well, it does have liver. You got that far? Is that sophisticated? I thought it was just like intestines and
It's stuff.
stuff. Yeah.
Stuff. Yeah.
Wow.
You take all the stuff together and you make a fancy name for it, and people think it's something.
And it's
Oh, and next Wednesday they have the middle school talent show is going to be up at Amsterdam High School. So if you want to hear a bagpipe solo, go up to the talent show next Wednesday night. So
That'll be in the
at Amsterdam High School they're playing.
Amsterdam High School
Yes, they are.
in the Bertha Rose Theater.
Bertha Rose Theater, absolutely.
Wow.
What a great place that is in there. What a change from.
Well, it is. It
Yeah,
is.
it
It
is
really.
pleasant.
The acoustics are so much better now, and the whole atmosphere is better.
When they did the original, basically they put the acoustics in backwards because the people in the back of the theater could not hear the people on the stage, but the people on the stage could hear
Right.
the people in the back
Right.
back talk,
Right.
chatter. I mean, that's why you shut up. There's no way to hear. But now acoustics is the way it's supposed to be, and it's comfortable, it's well lit, and doesn't flood.
I remember in the
That's
old
the key.
That's the key. Oh yeah.
in the olden days, I remember talking to Bert when they were first planning the school. It may not even been when they were planning it for up there. It might have been when they were planning it for the river or whatever it was.
Oh yeah.
I think it was even before he was principal. When he maybe still just a drama teacher at the school. That's how long ago this was. When the first plans were going in there, he was talking to me about, they'd come the plans for the theater at the new school, and it was going to be perfect. It was going to be to his specifications. They were going to have a revolving stage. There was going to be the most acoustically perfect theater in the world and everything. And then, of course, by the time they got around to building it, it wasn't, and it ended up with the what I call the Gus Grissom effect.
Lowest bidder, huh?
Yeah. Gus Grissom, of course, was the second American astronaut into space after Alan Shepard, and the reporter asked him afterwards, "How did you feel sitting on top of that Redstone rocket?" He says, "Well, to tell you the truth, I looked around me and said to myself, everything I see was built by the lowest bidder." So the first iteration of the new Amsterdam High School auditorium was god awful. The acoustic, the sound from the stage dropped dead at the stage line. It absolutely dropped dead.
Yeah.
If you could be heard at all, you had to be way up front. Stage front and yelling, because anything behind that invisible line just was absorbed, even if you were speaking loudly.
But if you sat in that front seat, your feet might get wet.
That's right, because of the drainage
Or lack thereof.
or lack thereof.
Yeah.
I mean, there were, you would have the sump pump going off in the middle of a show.
Yeah, you could see the
The line, yeah. Yeah, because
Floodline.
when it broke down, which happened more than once, that filled right up.
Yeah.
2 or 3 feet. Because that was, well.
They took care of the drainage when they
Anyway,
rebuilt that.
it's
and
a much
fabulous.
better theater now, more
Yeah.
comfortable, better designed all the way around.
Yep.
Yep, and the kids still do a wonderful job. God bless them.
Yes, they do.
And Bill Nelson and his drama club, and Stephanie and her orchestra or her band.
Yeah.
Not going to be the same without her, is it?
No, it's going to be different. It's going to be different. I mean, she was there a long time, and she, in all honesty, there is nobody that puts in more hours than the people from the music department. Mike Perry, Patty Valiente, and Stephanie Boyce. Whatever their stipend is for doing those things beyond teaching,
They didn't nowhere near what the work they're putting in for it.
if they pay them double, they still be underpaid, because they are, truly, when football season starts, the marching band starts. When football season's over, the rest of the additional music programs go on. Right now, they're getting ready for outdoor competitions. They just finished up NISMA. They just finished up, the competitions. They go all year long, and 99% of that stuff takes place after school. And
And they're usually off to, every other year they make a major
somebody
trip.
goes.
Yeah.
Every year somebody goes.
Yeah. Either the
vocal
chorus or the band
absolutely.
on alternate years.
So any kid who gets involved in the music program as a ninth grader, if they're just doing one portion of that, you've got 2 trips you're going to go on in your high school career. You're part of both. You go every year
Right.
someplace.
Right.
And there's not many schools that can claim that. And it's tough when they go up against Gitterland and Niskayuna and Shen, because those bands, you got all those kids take private lessons.
And you know what?
But our kids,
We clobber them every time, because there's nothing like it wherever you go. Wherever you go. We go play football in Albany. We bring our band down because nobody else has got one.
that's right.
I mean, you can't imagine how many kids go to Albany High, and you go down to Bleecker Stadium, and the band, the cheerleaders, the majorettes is all ours.
Yeah.
And the whole Amsterdam side is filled, and the Albany side there's a handful of people. It's like they're the visitors.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
They
It's
do,
amazing.
They do a great job, and it's a great source of pride,
And
as it should be.
the school has a great
As it should
following.
be, and anything that promotes excellence in the children, I am in favor of, and culture.
They do an excellent job here in the city. They really do.
So we do have a lot to be proud of.
Yeah.
And when you're on the school board, we'll be even prouder, Gavin.
We'll see. There's 3 people, 2 spots, and somebody's gonna get left out, and the people need to vote who they believe
They'll
can
probably-
do the best
they'll
job,
probably
and
give you-
that's fine.
They'll
And that's
give
what
you
they should
2
do.
spots. They'll give you 2 spots.
Yeah, we'll
I
give
can
you 2
be, I can be
spots.
twice as busy. No, it'll be interesting to see how the people go, and
Yes.
however the people vote is how they vote. Yeah, no problem with that at all.
All right, I think that's enough for this week. I think we're meeting again next week. I think that Louisa's graduation's the following week, but I'm not sure.
Use your email, let us know.
Yes, and probably I'll link Louisa's project presentation on the
Yes,
on
I'd
the
like to see
website
that.
too.
Yeah.
I'd like to see that.
I don't know if it's been posted yet, but yeah, she's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm so proud of her.
I'd like to see that.
That's a
All
good
right.
thing.
So, there's Jim Nikosha, there's Gavin Murdoch, our next school board member, and I'm Bob Going, and I'm not running for anything. And we'll see you all next week with more of the show with no name.